Erin, Ness, welcome to the ITA College Tennis Coaches Podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know we've been meaning to do this for a while. You've been getting very busy, taking on more responsibilities there at Washington and Lee, and appreciate you fitting this in and excited to get it out to the coaches. But Erin, do you want to start taking us back to your very earliest days? So my understanding is you became head coach at Santa Cruz 2 weeks after finishing your undergraduate degree. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is true. I was on a plane to Costa Rica when I got the job offer for a graduation trip.
Okay, and had you applied for the job or somebody reached out to see if you're interested?
I don't know if I actually formally applied for the job. Honestly, that was so long ago. I'm trying to remember the process. I'm pretty sure I was hired like out of desperation more than anything, because it was a part-time job. We got 10 grand a year, and so no one had really applied for it. And I was more looking at taking a gap year before applying to grad school. So I was a psychology major and wanted to go either into clinical psychology, get a PhD in that, or sports psychology. And I was doing grad work for a student who was working on her master's. So I figured I could stay, like get paid to do some research and, be the assistant coach for the program and kind of help transition in the new person. And no one had applied. And so I had also talked to my sports psychologist at the time about maybe taking over for a year and seeing how that went. And so I asked the athletic director. She was also brand new. So again, that's where the desperation piece came in. And she said, we'll give you an interim tag for a year. And I did it and ended up loving it. And yeah, the rest is history.
So what were some of the challenges you faced in the first few months or the first year? I mean, you literally no experience or very little. Maybe you did some coaching camps or clinics or something like that, but what were some of those challenges that you faced early on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure my only qualification was working the Santa Cruz Nike tennis camps, with Bob Hansen. And, in
Hmm.
no way, shape, or form was I ever qualified for this position. But I mean, the biggest challenge is you're coaching your teammates, and you're coaching your best friends. I was the only senior on the team, and I had, three generations of people I played with. And, all of a sudden you switch roles and you become their coach. And so you can't hang out with them anymore. You can't go out. You can't, like, your relationship with them changes so much. And
Hmm.
it's, and it was rough, in the beginning because they're some of my best friends, literally. And now I have to take on this somewhat professional role, which they definitely did not see me, as that professional. Is more like you're driving us to matches. We're basically trying to stay organized. So it's not a complete dumpster fire, my first year. And,
Hmm.
learned a bunch along the way. Obviously, Bob helped me tremendously, throughout my career. And he's a huge reason why I'm the person and the coach I am today. Um, but it was really sink or swim, kind of those
Yeah.
first few months, and just trying to figure out like how I had no idea how to get an official. I don't think I got an official for the first 2, 3 years. So I had no idea what I was doing, and trying to
Yeah.
figure out how to schedule teams, how to contact them, just the basics, like what does a practice look like, so you do the same stuff that you did as a player, but I
Hmm.
mean, I didn't have a huge junior background. I didn't do an academy. So I just didn't have the knowledge that even my teammates had come from that. So it was just, I literally started from scratch and was kind of self-taught, for
Hmm.
my whole career.
So I think it probably happens more than we think, right? That there's somebody thrown in the deep end for a whole host of reasons, and maybe they are coaching their teammates or they come from another program. Just very recently, they're 22, 23, 24 years old, don't have a lot of experience. So how you're self-taught, but what did that look like then? I mean, was it just having conversations with other coaches when you went to play them? Was there administrators? I mean, how, if you were going back to that place again, how might you speed up that process if you have to go through that again?
I think I'd have a better understanding of the value of networking, at that age when you're super young. Again, I was lucky through the camps. I mean, working with Bob, Ben Belletto, who was at Pomona, and then Whittier and Linfield. He's an incredible coach. So I was lucky enough to be surrounded by really great coaching minds. So I could just pick their brains, when I needed to. I think developing relationships with other coaches, but again, that didn't happen until, a few years in.
Hmm.
I didn't really know how to reach out to people. I didn't know I could, and so
Hmm.
I think I didn't really get a total grasp. And again, like those years are kind of fuzzy because I probably purposely blocked them out. But I think I didn't really get a grasp of what I was doing until probably my third year in. But I always knew the importance of culture because that was just ingrained in us from day one when we stepped into the program with my
Hmm.
coach, is just the importance of the culture of the team. And, that's the Santa Cruz way. And I think that's why I think my first few years I was able to be somewhat successful, and kind of figure it out. So once I decided I could figure out the culture piece and what keeps teams together and what keeps teams motivated, the tennis knowledge would kind of come with just doing it, and
Hmm.
just learning on the fly and observing and all that sort of stuff. I
So
don't even
were
know
there any?
the question. I'm sorry. I just kind of went on tangent.
No, no, you did. Were there any mistakes maybe that you made during that time that really stuck with you and even influence how you do things today? Maybe whether it's relationships with players or maybe it was a player development or a recruiting misstep. Is there anything that you're like, wow, I can't believe I made that mistake, but I'm kind of glad I did?
I mean, I think definitely recruiting because I had no idea what recruiting was. I just
Hmm.
remember my coach saying, "Hey, can you host this person?" And just really like, sure, why not? And then, but had no idea, the whole process. So that was probably my biggest um, mistake and learning curve is when is the application period? How do I sell the school? Do I, the fact that I needed to keep talking to them, was sort of new to me. And I definitely, I think, blew it, the first year for sure, first 2 years. I mean,
Hmm.
we had kids, luckily I knew kids at the Nike camp who were good enough. They wanted to come here so I could get them to apply and come, but it wasn't, until I really figured it out. I had a player, I think she came in like 2009, I want to say, became my second All-American, but she was the first person I really understood the process with and could see it through, to the end. And so I would say the recruiting piece was probably my biggest, mistake. But again, it's helped me understand the importance of it, the importance of maintaining the relationships with those kids, which is my favorite part, about recruiting is just learning who they are and watching them grow over the, 2.5 years, getting to know their families and all that. And so now I think I just have a better understanding and enjoyment, of that process, as stressful as it, can be as well to be told no, 40 times over in a year. But
Hmm.
I think that was probably my biggest sink or swim moment was trying to figure out the recruiting piece.
Yeah, so can you share a little bit more about the recruiting evolution then? So like you talked about the player that you saw the process through. Again, how did you figure out that okay, there I need to stay in touch with these players. It's not just contact them once. And then how did you start developing maybe a more cohesive system that has maybe evolved through the years to where you are now, but again, trying to help younger coaches, new coaches just speed up this process and understand what is required. But can you maybe talk a little bit more about that recruiting evolution and education and how you went about developing maybe your own system?
Yeah, so I think when I was told no more than I wanted to be told no or rejected, I think that's when I kind of learned I needed to change things up. Um,
Hmm.
so that's when I started learning I could go to tournaments, and watch people play, which sounds dumb now, but it was such a novel concept when I was 24 years old. You're like, wait, I can drive somewhere and do this. Um, and then definitely probably broke some rules too because I had no idea what I was doing. And then kind of seeing how our men did it as well, and like talking to Bob about how often he contacts players, how often he goes to see players, and I think it really a lot of it depends on the person, and I feel like I do a pretty good job of like reading people and understanding what they need from me, as a coach. And so whether it's someone who wants to talk frequently, wants frequent updates, or someone who I don't need to contact as much. or what aspects of the school are they really interested, or the program, versus not. And so I think I've evolved in a sense, and just really being able to identify what our program needs are, especially in terms of culture. Like, I'm a culture person first, and I learned very early on not to sacrifice what I've built here solely for talent. If someone's going to come in and is going to kind of be a cancer to it, like, to me, it's just not worth it. It sounds
Hmm.
like they could be really good, but if they're going to be a pain and ruin your culture for 4 years, it's really not worth it at all. Life's just too short, to deal with
Hmm.
it. So, um, luckily I was told that, I think, when I was like 24, 25, by another coach, and I've taken that to heart, and it's really helped me, tremendously to this day, identifying the players that we want. So
Hmm.
it I'm having a hard time like identifying, details, especially in the very beginning, just because again, it was so long ago. But I think a lot of it was just through trial and error, and just rejection and failure, and then learning that my system has to change and it has to evolve. And I think, we do a pretty good job now, but it's not, recruiting's not, you know black or white. Like, there's no magical
Hmm.
fix, to it, or everyone would be good. So it's like some
Yeah.
years it's great and you're just like, I'm the greatest recruiter on this planet, and other years, next year, you get very humbled and you're like, what am I doing? Why do I coach? And it makes you question your life. So um
Yeah.
I think as long as you kind of stay true to what you know and what works for you, and just kind of trust it, I think it works out, in the end.
Yeah. And Erin, you mentioned culture and trying to identify the right players. Are there any red flags for you when you go to watch or meet with players, with their families? Is there something that ticks you off, like, oh, maybe I want to avoid this player going forward?
I think a lot of it is when the parents are too involved,
Hmm.
in the process, when you're hearing from the parents instead of the player. Like in the beginning, once or twice, I don't mind. Mainly because we're a very family oriented culture, and that includes our parents. They're pretty involved, with the program, and I let them be. So if it's going to be someone where I talk to the mom more than the player, I'm gonna say no.
Okay.
How they act at tournaments, also in the other way, like how they treat their families, as well. If the kid's going to be really disrespectful to them, I'm not putting up with that, because chances are they're going to act the same, towards the coach. Um, I think attitude, on court as well. I mean, we all get angry. I get that. I was a pretty angry player for most of my college career until I finally figured out it didn't help. But if you just see it continuously over and over and over, with just, there's no desire to change it, or anything. And then just also like how they treat officials, how they treat their friends. You can just pick up on these little things, and
Hmm.
if someone's kind of in it for themselves, like, I had a recruiting call, first question out of their mouth was, how much free stuff do I get? And I was like, this is not going to be a match. And we're D3, by the way. So I was like, I can maybe give you like a sticker. And so, but so to me, like, that was a major red flag, right there. And
Yeah.
so.
Okay. And so you're in your 13th season now at Washington Lee. You're undefeated in conference play, 120 and 0,
I'm
which
like
is quite
knocking on all the wood
phenomenal.
right now.
That even if you lose every match this year, that's incredible that we can even say that. But what are some of the things that you believe you're doing? We've talked about recruiting, but what are you doing with your team that has allowed you to have such a high level of consistency? Maybe talk a little bit more about just what you're doing with your players on the court, in terms of their development, maybe even during matches, maybe how you're viewing matches and recognizing where you need to be. But there's something you're doing very well. There's probably lots of things you're doing well, but yeah, how does a coach get to this level of consistency?
I appreciate that, because I've thought about this. I have no idea, really. I'm hoping that like 19 years later, I picked up something, along the way. I think one of things we do really well here, again, is the culture of the program, but it's creating a space that allows my athletes to be vulnerable enough to succeed and fail, and so I think tennis is one of those sports that I mean, your heart's on your sleeve out there, and it's so vulnerable. And when it's just you and things aren't going your way, it's like, how do you respond to that adversity? Or if things are going your way and you're riding that high, and can you keep that going? Can you keep that momentum, not just during that match, but like the next day or a practice or whatnot? And so it's, I think it's allowing my players to kind of shed, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. Um, I think it's allowing them to feel safe enough to succeed and fail, but in the sense that they know that no matter what, like, I have their back and my assistants
Hmm.
have their back. And at a school like WNL, it's so academically driven, and the kids we get here are the most type A, like, top of their class. Everything has to be perfect. Like, a lot of them have never gotten a B before, in their life, and they come here and they get that first B or that first C. They lose their first college match, they don't play well. They realize they're not top of the lineup or even in the lineup, and they feel like their world's coming to an end, and it's my job to pick them up or help pick them up, I should say, and kind of say, "No, like, you're gonna be fine. This is just college," but giving them that space to feel those emotions and to make them feel like, "You know what? I'm human and it's okay," and to not be judged and to have that support. I think we do a really good job of that. In terms of player development, I've kind of changed my system. Probably this might be a little bit before COVID. So instead of just doing team stuff and then individuals like on top of the team stuff, 5, 6 days a week, we just have like one day that's only dedicated to individuals. And I know a lot of teams do this, but for me at that time, it was more of a novel concept. And so it just allows us to focus solely on like 1 to 3 individuals at a time for just a whole session, and to really get them going with, wherever they're going with their games, doubles, singles, what we need to maybe do that week to get ready for a match. So I think that's really helped with our player development. And then our off-season culture's changed, so much. We have a phenomenal strength and conditioning coach. And I think especially her being female has really helped our players to see that, hey, you know what, like, women in the gym, this is awesome. Like, we want to get strong. But she gets it, because she's female. And, I've got great leadership on the team. I've worked so hard to develop that leadership, recruiting kids who have that leadership potential. Like, you can kind of see it in juniors, like who's going to have it, who's not. And
Hmm.
them leading the team, through an off season. I mean, my kids hit probably 4 or 5 days a week, and, I'll watch them walk by and there's like 10 of them out there, like every day. And I've got a team of 12, some days it's like there's 12. Like, it's gotten so much better. And I think the off season especially is like why we've been so successful regular season, because we're not, struggling to get back into shape. Like, they're coming back in shape and it's just been awesome.
Hmm. And when you give that space to be, I guess, vulnerable in failure, do you think your players are maybe playing looser in pressure points, or when a match is coming down to the wire because maybe they're less concerned about letting you down or letting their teammates down? They have a recognition that it's okay to fail, or have you, is that just one of many things that might be attributed to the way you're running your program?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of many things. I don't think they've ever had really a fear of letting me down in a sense, but I think it's the enjoyment of competing with each other, and so, but knowing that they're not going to win every match. And so I think it's more of the release of them not letting their teammates down, more
Mm.
than anything, because they know who I am. Like, they know that unless they absolutely just tank, like, I'm going to support them. But I
Mhm.
think it's bigger when you feel like you've let your teammates down and your peers, because being a part of a team is, you're part of something that's bigger than yourself, and that's a cool thing to be a part of. But at the end of the day, that's also a lot of pressure. And so,
Mhm.
I think having that release and knowing that in the moment it might feel like it, but at the end of the day, it's not. And they can go right back, pick themselves up. Their teammates will give them a hug and be like, "Look, we know you fought. We know you tried. We love you." And then we're
Mhm.
ready to go the next day. And so I think just creating that space, and it's just a mutual respect and love for each other, that
Mhm.
we have within this program. And so, like, as long as you're working hard and you're being like the best teammate you can be, like, we love you, you're going to be accepted. And, um, And so I just think it's just creating that environment of, acceptance and safety.
So really, do you not spend much time dwelling on losses then? So whether the specific player loses or the team loses a match, do you, I don't want to say breeze over it, but do you guys just move on very quickly from it? Or how do you manage losses then?
I mean, we'll talk about it, for sure, and just kind of talk
Hmm.
about where we need to move forward, especially with individuals. Like, all right, what do we need to do now, moving forward? And so, but it's something we don't really harp on, necessarily.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, how do we get better? Like, just how do we constantly get better? And so, I mean, even with wins too, I mean, there's never going to be a match, or maybe it's very rare where you're like, this is the best tennis we've ever played, and then you can duplicate it again. Like it just
Hmm.
doesn't happen. And so even with wins, it's like, hey, maybe this isn't our best match. We got through it, but we might not be so, fortunate in the next one. So like, how do we get better? And so,
Hmm.
and then everything we talk about is like, what are we doing in May? Like, how are we playing in May? Like, that's just always our target. And so we just obviously we want to win. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm a very competitive person. Um, and I came here because I want to win, but it's also not everything,
Hmm.
and so each match is just kind of like that next stepping stone to like what we can do at NCAAs. And so
Hmm.
like, what can we take away? What can we learn from it and all that?
So I mean, do you get the sense, not to speak for other coaches, but do you get the sense maybe you do a better job than some other coaches at not dwelling on those losses, and freeing your players up, or how has that maybe evolved over your coaching career? I mean, did you feel like you were holding on too tight early in your career, or did you always have this kind of healthy balance between wins and losses and winning not being everything?
Yeah, I would say I'm definitely not better. Like, I think I'm just different because at the end of the day, like, I mean, I know who I am, as a coach, and I definitely am like, I'm not better than a lot of people, by any means. I think just the way I approach things is different, and that's probably based on my personality too. Like, outside of the court, I'm like very laid back, pretty chill, like just not a lot bothers me. And I think that's helped me evolve with that mindset. Cause I remember, I mean, in my 20s, like I want to win everything. Of course, when I was at Santa Cruz, like I knew it wasn't possible, but I was like, I my highs and lows were based sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to say this intelligently. Um, I would say like my mood was a lot more result dependent, than
Mm,
it is now. Like, yes, if we have a bad loss, I'm probably pissed and like, just in a dark closet for a little bit here, but not as long as I was, back at Santa Cruz. And,
mhm,
and I think being around Bob really helped as well because now he might be the most competitive person I've ever met in my entire life. And I know a lot of people can attest to that, who know him.
mhm,
But the way saw it, and he saw it very similar to me, like he just got so motivated by losses that like, I mean, that's how I learned how to, I guess, kind of, I don't want to say brush them off because that's not the right phrase, but you just don't dwell on it as much. But it just makes you
mhm,
hungrier, to keep getting better. But also knowing that like you're just not going to be undefeated every year. Like you're not
mhm,
going to win a title every single year. I mean, now don't get me wrong, there are coaches who have dynasties and they are phenomenal, but it's just not going to happen. And so I think it's like once you understand that, like you could play your absolute best and still lose. And that's something that I try and get into my players' heads a lot and into myself too. I'm like, I could coach the best match of my life. And to be fair, I probably only have like a 5% effect anyway on a match, but like, that 5%, I could like really be in the zone and my player will still lose that match, or I could still get out coached. Like I understand that. And so I think having that mentality has just really helped me be able to kind of, yeah, losing sucks, but like it's not the end of the world. Like we're gonna be fine
yeah.
at the end of the day.
And have you seen a correlation then with your players playing a bit looser? I mean, as you've held on to those losses less, as you've dealt with them better, as maybe you've matured as a coach, do you see that trickle down effect to the players then? Or is it just you haven't really reflected on it, it's just kind of happened organically through the years?
Yeah, I would say the majority is just organically. Mainly because I know how much pressure the kids put on themselves.
Mm,
And so it's again, especially at a high academic institution like this, to, have the 4.0 and to never lose a match in their life. It's if I did
yeah.
that to them, I mean, they break. So I feel like I have to be that constant balance of, pulling
Mm,
them back to be like, no, 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 like we want to do well, but like we're gonna enjoy this too. Because you only get 4 years. And,
hmm
as we both know, it flies by, really fast. And so it's just kind of stepping back, like enjoying it, enjoying competing and, having the desire to compete. And like that's what I don't want them to lose. It's just that
Yeah.
enjoyment of going out there and just like fighting and battling.
Okay. And so just moving on to kind of more the administrative side of things now that you've taken on the role of SWA, do you view the sport of tennis or the role of the coach any differently now that you're sitting in that administrator seat?
That's a great question. Yes and no, because I'm not really in charge of a sport, which is probably a good
Hmm
thing here. I think learning more about just how a department is run has
hmm
been really eye-opening for me. I think because we have other coaches in administrative roles here, and so I think for a lot of institutions who have that, like, obviously, I have a much more or a newfound respect for coaches who are in these administrator roles and who are successful. Um,
hmm
because my workload's probably doubled now. With
Yeah.
all this. And, as you know, I feel bad when I can't make a meeting. So like, sorry, I've got, admin stuff I'm doing. And
hmm
it is just a lot. And I think it's trying to think. Let me start over. Um, I'm trying to say, like, I read the question, I just didn't know how to answer it
Yeah.
because I am not, because mainly because I don't oversee things. Like
hmm
100% the last person who should be in charge, of another coach or another sport. But um, it's, I think it's just more of like, it's been more eye-opening, like how decisions make in an athletic department and like what makes an athletic department go and like
hmm
why these decisions are made. Like why one sport might get told no, another sport get told yes.
hmm
When you're not on the inside, it's like, well, that's just not fair. Like clearly you favor this sport over another sport, but that's not true.
hmm
And so to me that part's been fascinating. So I think I just have a greater respect and more, it's more eye-opening just to see how decisions are made, I guess, and
hmm
like why decisions are made, where money goes to, all that sort of stuff.
And so, how do you think tennis coaches could receive more yeses from their administrators? Or are there certain, as those decisions are being made, how much does it come down to the competitiveness of the team, versus just basic needs, infrastructure needs, um, hiring new coaches, hiring assistant coaches? But obviously, a coach wants to put in requests and receive yeses and get all the resources. That's not always possible. But are there certain things that tennis coaches, college tennis coaches, can be doing to, I get more favor within their athletic department? Is there anything that comes to mind that you're seeing like, well, that coach just did this. There's no way they're getting a yes for their most recent request, or they're kidding themselves if they think they do, if they're going to act or behave or demand something in that way.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna only speak on D3 just because I think our
Hmm
infrastructure is very different than a D1,
Sure.
even D2 program. Um, I think a lot of it you have to look at need versus want. And so
hmm
as coaches, like we want so much. We're always going to want more money, for our budgets. We're always going to want, you know, new equipment, new, whatever. But you have to look at it as when these decisions are being made, is it an absolute need and how immediate is that need?
mm
And so if it's something that is immediate that you need at the moment, do your research, like find the pricing for whatever it is you need, give the reasons and not just, you know, sob story or whatnot, but like give actual data of like why you might need this, how this is going to benefit your program, and then present it. So your admin or whoever may be in charge of your sport or your athletic director, whatnot, can now see why exactly this is a need at that moment. Or maybe
Hmm.
it's something that says, like, look, our facility, we're going to need it revamped in the next 5 years. Go through what that's going to look like, find all the costs. Again, costs might change in 5 years, but at least give them an idea of like, this is coming down the pipe and this is why. That way they're prepared instead of just having it being thrown on them. And then you as a coach are like, well, why can't I get this now? Like, why can't I get this now? And then just, be very aware of like how you ask, too. And so I think, I'm someone who I don't ask for a ton. So they know that when I do need something, I'm actually serious, about it. And
Right.
usually I get pretty much, I do very well. We'll put it that way. But, I'm not going
Hmm.
to be obnoxious about it. And I'm going to be very rational and reasonable about like why I need certain things for my program.
Hmm. Okay. Well, let's move into some rapid fire questions. What is the best piece of advice you've received as it relates to college coaching?
Okay, I purposely didn't look at these questions to make them rapid. So I apologize. um, I think the best piece of advice is the one I mentioned earlier, is just not sacrificing your culture, for talent, especially if it's going to create that drama and that person's going to be a cancer. Like again, it's just not worth it, at the end of the day. And I've turned down kids who could definitely help us out, but I just know their reputation. I know their family's reputation, and doesn't help if you've been suspended from the USTA. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take you. So like
Hmm.
that's just how it is. So just yeah, don't sacrifice your culture.
What piece of advice do you relay most consistently to the next generation of coaches who ask you for advice?
Hmm. This is not rapid. I would say the biggest thing is just don't be afraid to ask, for help. Because I remember being at that age,
Mm.
I knew I didn't know anything, but I also thought I knew everything, at the same time. So I was just kind of like living in a state of stupidity for a while and probably stubbornness. And so that's not going to help you, at all. Um,
Mhm.
Obviously there are things that, you think that you're like, yes, go ahead and do it. Like if you're confident in it, try it, see if it works, but just don't be afraid to reach out to others and ask for help. Like whether it's other coaches in your conference, people across your division or whatnot. Just there's so many people who are willing to help out. You just have to do it.
Mhm. What is your favorite drill to do with your team?
Oof. Um, I would say it's this game we play. God knows what the term, there's probably 20 terms for it. It's so simple, but they have a blast. And so just see them like laughing and smiling and running around like crazy. So I think some people call it approach volley overhead. We call it master blaster, which is controversial. It's a big fight on the team, but again, it's just such a simple kind of stupid game, but like they love it. And so for me, I'm like, just to see the looks on their faces when we play, that's all I care about. They're just having fun at the end
Yeah.
of the day.
All right, and that's like doubles. They had an approach,
Oh
and
yeah,
then if they
sorry.
win
Yeah,
that, they hit a volley. If they win that, they get an overhead, and then they change ends.
yeah, you're clearly a master of Master Blaster. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's
I've done that one a few
yep.
times. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
is fun time. It is a fun time. Is there a book that's had the greatest impact on you as a coach?
So I'm not gonna lie, when I first read that question, for some reason Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban came through my head, but that's clearly not it. I would say um there's a book, Way of the Champion by Jerry Lynch. And
Hmm.
Jerry's my sports psychologist at Santa Cruz. He worked a lot with our men's tennis program there, but he's also worked with a bunch of D1 programs. And so his book, Way of the Champion, has really helped me a lot, not only when I was a player, but, coaching and still, to this day.
Okay. Um, with everything going on with NCAA Division One college athletics, do you foresee any potential positive or negative trickle down impacts on Division Three college athletics?
I mean, I think there's going to be a delayed trickle down. Um, there's been so many changes, and I unfortunately missed Tim's speech at the convention about it, I think. But I think eventually it'll trickle down. I don't think it's going to have as big of an impact on D3 as I think a lot of people might expect. Um, like the roster numbers, depending on whether it's men or women, I think it's gonna affect the men's side negatively a little bit more than the women's side. Just because you see, these 5-star guys who are coming to D3 are now gonna be offered roster spots, at the D1 level. Um, I think in terms of NIL stuff, I don't think that's gonna be huge, at the D3 level. I know there's schools who are doing NIL. I think it'll come down, but I mean, I'd be shocked if we have D3 players making like $1 million in NIL money. I mean, they will eventually when they graduate, but like probably not, during their athletic time here. So
Hmm.
it's just, I mean, I'm not going to give you a great answer, so you can even cut this question just because I'm not as familiar with what's happening, going through. But I just
Yeah,
really think the the philosophy of D3 just isn't going to let it happen.
yeah,
That makes
yeah.
sense.
No, makes perfect sense. What is one thing I should know or consider about Division 3 college tennis as I get ready to assume the CEO position at the ITA?
Um, that's a great question. Um, I would say it's in terms of division, I think it might be your largest membership in terms of schools. Um, just I think maybe just kind of being around, a little bit more like going to indoors, for both, men and women. I think kind of understanding that D3, it's unique in its own way, but it's
Hmm.
such a great division in terms of the philosophy, the competitiveness, the talent level we have, in D3 definitely compares to a lot of the lower level to mid level, Division 1 schools.
Hmm.
Um, I think you just have, and the fact that like our athletes aren't on scholarship and we have these high level athletes who are doing it because they love it. I mean, at any moment I could wake up and my team could be like, I just don't want to play tennis anymore. And there's nothing I can do about it. I don't have a scholarship on it, And so I think interacting with the coaches and athletes who truly love this Division 3 lifestyle and the philosophy, I would say just kind of delve more into it, like get to know us a little bit more. I would say I understand Division 1 takes a huge spotlight. I really do get that. Like that's where a lot of the money is, but um I would just say just pay attention a little bit more. What's going on with our division. I think you guys being on some of our operating calls has been really helpful. I think you've been on almost all of them, at least in the past year and a half. And so I know that's been appreciated, and helpful. So I think just kind of not just talking to the operating committee though, but really getting to know the coaches at convention or nationals, like coming to D3 nationals, at some point and just
Hmm.
to kind of see what it's about and who these student athletes are about and the coaches are about. And just, I'm trying to put it in terms of, I'm trying to, I know the pulse of how D3 thinks about this. I'm just trying to, be kind of respectful about it. It's just, I think just like
You don't have
acknowledging.
to be respectful.
I'm just trying to say like just acknowledging us a little bit more, as
No,
I
yeah.
would say it's like it's important in its own way. It's unique in its own way. And I think just acknowledging that will go a long
Hmm.
way.
Yeah. All right. Well, well, firstly, I've booked all my flights to be at all the indoor championships in February, and my wife is not thrilled with me, but I'm also going to try and do the same in May and get to all the national championships. So that is definitely something I plan to do this coming year. But yeah, I think if I was ever to go back to coaching now that what I've learned about D3 tennis in the last few years, it would definitely be at Division 3. I'm very clear on that. I think I missed my boat there not being a Division 3 coach. So, but I'm looking forward to learning lots more. So last question, Erin, what is one thing you hope your players have learned from you by the time they graduate?
Ooh, that's a terrifying thought. Um, I this has changed like so much since I've gotten older,
Hmm.
which is crazy because I would have zero answer for you when in my 20s because I'm only 3 years older than them. Um, I think it's okay. This is gonna sound really stupid. I probably shouldn't say this. I'm going to. So I think a lot of it's just life's too short to take yourself seriously, like that seriously. I love this job. I love my players and they know that. And I will work for them and I know I work hard, especially with everything that I have going on. I'm gonna give them everything I have, but at the end of the day, I don't want to look back and just say my life was just work. It's like I want to be able to enjoy it. I want my players to see that I have the balance between being competitive and driven, but also having fun with it. Because that's what I don't want them to lose that fun part, in their life and that fun side of them. And
So I think,
like I just think life's too short,
well,
for it. It's yeah, you just miss like these great moments and you can get so wrapped up in your job being your identity and you being that student athlete is just solely who you are or your results are your identity and
mhm,
that I just don't think that's a great headspace to function in. And so I think
mhm,
if you can find that balance of um competing and working but enjoying it and having fun with it and um
mhm,
whether you're coaching or you're in finance or you're, becoming a doctor or whatnot, like whatever my kids do. I mean, there's always going to be joy in it. I just like don't want them to kind of lose that, I guess.
I used to think when I was coaching and gripping on so tight and just so consumed with it and thinking it's the most important thing in the world that there's some, pick your country, under 12 soccer coach in Venezuela coaching that same day, feeling the exact same emotions, thinking it's like all this stuff that we do, it all can't be the most important stuff in the world. So, yeah, I think mistakes are made when you take things too seriously. I think relationships can be ruptured, and so yeah, I think the country, the world would be a more peaceful, harmonious place if we all took ourselves less seriously. So,
Yeah.
good
Well, it's like
answer.
be the
Good
person
answer.
who's like, work hard, your dreams will come true. Like that's just like so mundane to me. And so sorry. So sorry I didn't give you that. I thought about quoting Blades of Glory, but I decided not to.
All right. Well, Erin, thank you for doing this, and excited to hopefully see you at some point in person in the new year at a Division 3 event.
Yeah, thank you. No, this was great. I appreciate it.